and have God reveal to us if there's any um, sinful nature that we need to address. And, I'm definitely uh, one of them. I need to do that myself as well. Um, I think one of the other parts that he mentioned was, um, of course, the father in the story is bless you. The father in the story is, of course, God, and the first son comes back, and he says, "Father, I'm so sorry. I've sinned against heaven and against you." And that's one of the most important things is having the heart of repentance. So I just want to encourage that as well. The Father forgave that son, and he forgives us too. He wants us to come back, and just ask him for forgiveness and to love on us. So I just want to pray into that. Lord, thank you for today. Just thank you for all of the blessings that you have given us, the resources. I pray that you would reveal to us all the things that we can be doing more for your kingdom. Reveal to us time that we have to spend helping others and just giving of our resources and finances where we can. Um, Lord, just we ask that you search our hearts and reveal to us any sins that need to be addressed. Um, just just pray that we can all work on them. I'm so thankful for this church, for all of the for the leaders and um, everything that they're doing. We're just so thankful to have our new pastor Yun on his way here very soon. Um, yeah, and just man, what a blessing it is to be a part of this body. Um, just so thankful for your faithfulness. God, thank you so much. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Who is Joe? My man. Okay,
The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created. In the beginning, the Word already existed.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Lord, thank you again. We just come before you, Lord, and we lay everything at your feet. Just pray that you would be with Joe today as he preaches and just open our ears and our hearts to hear the message. And I pray that you would just speak through Joe. We're just so thankful for this man here. He's so wise. Um, he's such an inspiration, and I just pray that he would be an encouragement to everybody, and that his message would speak to each and every one of us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought life to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. This is the story of bad decisions being made whole. A story of unlikely heroes paving the way, of how it all began and how it's going to end. It's a story of redemption. How an all-powerful, all-knowing God stepped down into a broken world, and despite our own rebellion, made a way for us, carving a path through the darkness to light, bearing the consequences that we deserved so that we could be restored. This is his story, and how we get to be part of the next chapter. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word...
Remix. Good morning. All right. That's cool. So today we get to talk about Moses. I just want to share something real quick. So um, Maria and I dated for 7 years before we got married. I had asked her like 2 or 3 times to get married, and she was like, no. So I was like, okay, then whenever you're ready, you'll let me know. And that never happened, so I asked again. And but we I gave her a promise ring, and we were that was really short because we got married like a month later. But it just reminds me of kind of like the story now, right? There's a promise and there's a time between the promise and the actual wedding, right? Before you marry. And so God makes a promise that he's going to give them, he's going to turn them into a nation that will bless the whole earth. And, we kind of do that too, right? When we get married, we get married and we do vows. And I was just thinking about the vows and, like in general, like when people don't write their own vows, it's like, in the name of God, I, Joe, take Maria to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better and for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. This is my solemn vow. So an agreement that we make, when we tell each other these vows, this is what we vow to do. It's not something that we're gonna have perfect all the time, but it's something that it's like a base to build a relationship. Like we're bringing this thing together. We're gonna be like this little tiny kingdom, like this cellular kingdom, and these are the kind of like the barriers we're gonna be in order to make this relationship work. We're building our house. This is our house. And if we follow these principles, our house will be better. Well, this is kind of what happens with God. He's building his house. He's building his kingdom, and he's taking his kingdom out of somewhere like Daddy's house, and he's taking them to a new place. But he's going to set some rules because he's starting to build a relationship, and it's not just we don't do these vows just for us, because eventually we'll have kids, and it also improves the relationship. If my relationship with Maria is good, then the relationship with the kids is good. If we're stressed out, we're screaming, the kids are sad and they're stressed out. But it's the same thing with God, right? He makes these rules not to be lording over them, but like this is a relationship between me and you. And not only for me and you, but also for the people that are going to be part of our nation. It's almost like when we look at politics, you have the Democrat platform and the Republican platform. He's like, this is my platform. These are the rules that we're going to go by. So, why do we do this? We often hear people say, relationships are 50-50, right? It's a 50-50 relationship. You do your part, I do my part. I heard somebody say it's not 50-50, it should be 100-100. And we can trust that God will be 100 with his keeping of his end of the bargain. We're the ones that have a hard time keeping the 100. Sometimes we're at 30, sometimes we're at 90, but God's always there to redeem. And this is pretty cool because next week we're going to have a marriage brunch, and it's kind of cool how we're kind of talking about like setting things up for the wedding. But next week we'll like rehash go over some stuff that'll remind us of these things for the wedding. So if you aren't signed up, sign up. Okay, so one of the promises that God made to Abraham is that he would give them a nation that would influence the whole world. Last week, Micah went over that. He went over Abraham and what happened. Abraham had 2 kids, and then out of those 2 kids, Isaac had 2 more kids, Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob had a bunch of kids. And I think that's probably where the Mexican line is from, because in both our families, it's like my mom had a bunch of brothers and sisters to where we can keep up with all the names. It's pretty easy because they're all Juan and Jose. But Maria's the same way. And there's a bunch of girls, so they're all Marias. But it's just a big family, right? And I was kind of disappointed in reading like through it because I was like, oh man, they went straight from Abraham to Moses, and I was like, what happened to Joseph? You know, that's my favorite story. I love Joseph and the multicolored shirt and the dreams and stuff like that. But hey, but it's a cool story. I recommend you read that one too. But we're going to be focusing on Moses today. Moses is so Joseph brings the people into Egypt because there was a famine in the land, and there was no food. But Joseph had a dream that he would help them. For 7 years, they would store up food, and for the 7 years of famine, they would have food because of what the Pharaoh dreamed. It was a Pharaoh's dream, not his dream. And but in that process, everybody was in famine and nobody had food. So they went to Egypt because everybody was like, man, we heard there's a dude in Egypt that hooked it up. And they all have food over there. Everybody's eating over there. We're over here starving. So Jacob, who is now Israel, is like, hey, you guys need to go check it out. Go see what's going on over there. Little did they know that was actually their brother they had sold into slavery, who was in charge of this whole thing. But he helps them out, and he tells Pharaoh, hey, this is my these are actually my brothers and sisters. I have probably another one somewhere that I didn't that I really don't know about. But my dad's back in our hometown. Can we bring him over here? And he brings them back, and they all go to live with him in Egypt. But time passes, 400 years. 400 years pass, and they're in Egypt. So what are things that you guys have heard of the story of Moses? Is what? Mm-hmm. You put him in a basket. That's good because that's why his name's. Yeah, yeah. So that's why his name Moses, right? Because he came out of water. Now he almost got killed like Jesus. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she was talking about how the babies were all killed before Jesus, and they were also all killed before Moses. Yeah, for Moses, it was because there were too many of them, right? And they're like, hey, house midwives, get rid of the boys. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. And then they lie to the Pharaoh. But God's like, hey, that was a good thing because you saved all the babies. Because, they're like, oh, man, these women are strong. They have the babies before we even get there. So anything else? Anything else anybody remembers from the story? Oh, yeah, he did. He did. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. You want to come to the story? I'll sit down. She knows the whole story. Cool. Well, that's cool. A lot of us learned it I did learn it in kids' church, but we used to go to that church that I don't know why my parents sent us there, but we learned about the story. So, like I said, now the Egyptians have been there. Now we're going to move towards how Moses happened and why it happened. Moses was the Israelites were living in Egypt now for about 400 years, and they were growing. There were a lot. It was a lot of them. Like they were having all kinds of children, which is why they wanted to stop them. And so Pharaoh is noticing that, and he's like, hey, if we don't stop this, if we go to war one day, there's so many of them, they might side with the enemy and come and attack us and overtake us. So we got to start doing something. And so they started getting rid of they started getting rid of the boys, which is something that they do over in China. They get rid of boys, right? They keep the girls. So, oh, it's the other way. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Well, yeah, so they started getting rid of the boys, and they just wanted to keep girls, and so then that starts happening, and they see that there's a lot of people, and so the people start crying out, and God raises up Moses to take them out. But Moses grew up with them, and he was put in the river and taken out of the river by the Egyptian princess, and she raises him, and she actually hires the mom to raise him without even knowing it was a mom. So he grows up with them, but then finds out that he was actually one of the Israel children. And so he goes out there and he tries to see what's going on. And he sees that one of the Egyptians is treating one of the Israelites bad. And he said he hits him and accidentally kills him, but everybody finds out about it. So then he sees that an Israelite is treating an Israelite bad, and he goes and tries to talk to him too. And the Israelite, man, who the heck are you? You think you're some kind of savior or something that's going to tell us what to do? You're nobody. And he's like, you know what? Maybe you're right. And he finds out that everybody knew that he had killed the Egyptian, because the guy's like, you're going to do me like you did that Egyptian? And he's like, oh man. So he gets scared and he leaves, and he ends up in a whole different land. And like Rachel said, also he starts to have a family, and it takes a couple of years, like 40 years over there. And then finally God calls him and he says, hey, I want you to come take my people out. And he's like, what? I don't want to do that. He's like, I can't do that. And even though he makes a bunch of excuses, he says, okay. And he goes to do it. And he goes back and he says, what am I going to say when I go over there? Who am I going to tell them send me? And he says, tell them that I am, which is really cool, because if they would have just focused on that, because he's like, I am. And that like fills in, we talked about that. I brought that up Wednesday, and he's like, I am that I am. If they would have just thought about that, like, I am that I am, imagine all of the things they wouldn't have went through if they would have just remembered that he said, I am. I am. Oh, we need food. Well, I am the one that will give you food. Well, we need water. I am the one. It was just this, like, just realizing, and it made me think, like, I am. Like, all the things that we wanted that we could need, he's like, I am. And we're like, wow. It just makes you think, like, wow, I am. Whatever I want, I am. If I need it, I am. He will do it. So he moves. So he goes in there and he tells the Pharaoh, I need you to let my people go. And he's like, nope. And so he, his heart is hardened, and he doesn't let the people go. And so he says, now we're going to send some plagues to try to get him to let the people go. And so there's 10 plagues, and he still doesn't let them go. Finally, during the last plague, the angel of death passes over and kills all the firstborn kids, and except for the people who had marked their doors with the blood of a lamb, which is another foretelling of something that was going to happen later. So he finally gives in, and he lets them all go, and he releases him, and they're going through. They're going to the promised land, and they run into a little problem, and there's a big, giant water mass that they have to cross through, and they're complaining, how are we going to do it? The Egyptians are following us. So Moses talks to God, and he says, just put your staff down, and he will split the Red Sea. And he splits the Red Sea, and they all walk through there. And I was reading that it was like, how many days was it that it was actually open? Like 7 days? It was like 7 days that it was open for them to walk through. And so they walk through, and they make it to the other side. The water comes down and kills the Egyptians. And then they start to go towards the promised land, and they go to a mountain, Mount Sinai, right? They go to Mount Sinai, and in Mount Sinai, Moses goes up, and God speaks to him, and he gives him the 10 Commandments. He comes down, and he gives him the 10 Commandments, and he teaches him. But while he was up there, Aaron, who was supposed to be the priest, starts building a calf. So here we see, right? He hasn't even given them the 10 Commandments, and they were already breaking them. Like the first two are like, love the Lord your God, and do not put any idols before you. And he hasn't even come down to show them. And as he's coming down, he sees they're already breaking the commandments, you know. And like I said, the reason he gives them the 10 Commandments is like that marriage vow, right? It was to keep them like saying, these are my people, and this is how you will know my people. If you follow this, this will be part of my family. These are the rules for my family. Because all he really wanted was a relationship. He's still trying to build the relationship up from what it used to be in the Garden of Eden. And he's building it around, one of the things that stood out was like, he's building it around a priestly system, because they didn't have a king yet, because that happens next week with Mo. But he was building it around a priestly kingdom. And Moses was kind of a priest, and so was Aaron. But Aaron kind of messed up, and Moses goes back up to the mountain, and he pleads to God, and he says, "Man, look, please forgive them, Father, please forgive them. I will give you my life. Kill me, but just forgive them. As long as you forgive them, I don't care if I die." Which is another example of the future of what Jesus does. But God says, okay, I won't kill you, because he offers himself up for as a sacrifice, and he doesn't kill him, and he also forgives the people, and he comes back down, and even though Aaron had done what he did, he still becomes a priest, and they keep going, and but he says now, because of what you guys did, and then Aaron has 2 sons, and his sons basically do something bad, and they die inside of the tabernacle. So he gives them a map on how to draw a tabernacle and where God would sit, and he builds his tabernacle, and that is where God resides. And he chooses some priests that could only go to a certain place. Josh loves to talk about that. And but there was one priest that could go all the way in, and that happens to be the guy that had just built the idol. So it shows God's forgiveness, and how God will always restore things. We see that even Moses messes up, because he tells him, "Hey, tap the rock, and if you tap the rock, you'll get water." And Moses is like, dang, he was so mad at the people that he just bangs on the rock. And he's like, dude, I told you to tap it once. And so he doesn't listen, and he says, "Now, because of all these things you've done, this generation will not make it into the promised land." And so 40 years pass, and they're wandering around, and nobody makes it, not even Moses or Aaron, because they sit at the top of the mountain, and he says, "I'm going to show you the promised land, but you don't get to go in it." And so Moses dies and doesn't get to go in the promised land. Aaron, I believe, takes off his priestly garb, and immediately after he takes it off, boom, he dies. So nobody gets to make it, and it's the next generation that gets to make it into the promised land. Go ahead. Yeah. But once again, God redeems all things, because who sits on top of the mountain with Jesus? Yeah, Moses and Elijah. They're sitting there talking to him. So There's always redemption with God. No matter how far you get, he will redeem it. No matter how bad the story goes, he will always redeem it. I never used to like reading the genealogy because I was like, this is pointless. Why do I need to know who's who's daddy? And as I was reading the genealogy one time, it says, so from the lineage, it says this, so from Solomon was born from Rahab, who was the wife of Uriah, who David tried to kill. And so it's like the worst thing that David did, he turns around. I'm sorry, Mo, if I'm taking anything from you, but but he redeems that, right? And he through that lineage of the son that came from this crazy thing that David did, the worst thing he did, he redeems it, and from that line, Jesus comes. So it's so cool that you see all this redemption, and there's a lot of parallels in the New Testament where they talk about. I'll talk about that later. But so they make it in. They finally make it into the promised land, and they start acting crazy again. But that's the big picture, right? We see that constantly. God does something for them, they mess it up, and he has to redeem it. God does something, they mess it up, and he has to redeem it. God does something, they mess it up, and he has to redeem it. And that goes for us too, right? At a very personal level, because it was a personal thing. He's a very personal God, and he wants a relationship not just with the nation, but with each individual in it. He wants all of us to have this relationship, and for us to know that even though we mess up, he's always gonna. There's always room to redeem it as long as we give him a chance to do it. All right, so I'm going to ask some questions. So does God hear the cries of his people? She said, yes. All right,
Yes,
can you guys
Joe.
give me some examples of God doing this in your life? Can you guys give any examples of God doing this in your life? You crying out to him and him answering it?
I asked that the Lord would give me an apartment, and I live in one now, and friends, and here we are.
All right.
There you go, guys.
Anybody else?
He provides, eh?
Tom? Oh,
I didn't want to share it. I was telling you personally.
Messed up. I was just telling you personally. Sorry, I can't speak. Yeah, my coming to Jesus story was like me living in the trailer parks in California. A couple months before the World Race. This is before I was a believer, but I was on my knees. I was deep in like weird stuff, substance abuse at that time, and then I was just like prayed like on my knees, so dramatic, crying, God, if you're real, Jesus, if you're real, like make this like something like that I can see. And then from then on, like it was just like it was simple things, but it builds up. You're like,
yeah.
You just knew that was like an answered like prayer kind of thing. I just started to hear the voice of it, like his voice like more clearly. Like I knew this is him. Like I've never had that before, so that was weird.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah,
That's
I'm
good.
pretty dramatic like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was in middle school, gangs were a big thing, and this guy said, "You want to join the gang?" And I was like, "Okay." So I went and I joined the gang, and so it was like 5 minutes of butt kicking to get into the gang, but if you wanted to get out, it was 10. And so they told me that ahead of time. They were like, "You're gonna get your butt kicked for 5 minutes. It might be 3 of us, or it might be 5 of us." And so, lucky me, 3 showed up. So 3 people kicked my butt for 5 minutes, and they actually timed it. So they kicked my butt for 5 minutes, and I was officially in the gang. I hadn't thought it through. And so I get home and I'm like, because I could care less what my friend said, but I was worried about what my mom was gonna do. I was like, man, my mom is gonna kick my butt. I had just gotten my butt kicked for 5 minutes, and I'm worried about my mom kicking my butt. And so I'm like, my mom's gonna kick my butt if she finds out I'm in a gang. How am I gonna tell her? What am I gonna do? And I remember I fell on my knees and I was like, God, please get me out of this gang. And I remember 10 minutes, and I was like, I know I messed up. And if I gotta get my butt kicked for 10 minutes to get out, I don't care what the guys say. And if it's 5 of them, I'll take it. And so I go back the next morning, and I told one of the guys that clicked me in, I said, hey man, I don't want to be in this gang. I just can't tell my mom, because she'll kick my butt worse than you guys did. And so the guy's like, man, you'll never know what happened. And I was like, what happened? He's like, man, the leader of the gang did something dumb last night, got arrested, and he's probably going to go to jail for 5 to 6 years. And so he's like, the gang's done because the leader's gone. We don't have anything to do. And so I was like, man, right back on my knees. Thank you, God. Thank you, Father. But it was just like this thing, like I cried out and I was like, Father, I don't want my mom to be mad at me because I did this. And it was kind of cool because now that I think about it, I'm like, wow, I dismantled a whole gang just by praying. But but it's one of those examples of him, of crying out, and him coming. Got 2 more? Okay, who else? Tom?
Okay, December 2013, my now ex-wife left with Caden and had a well-orchestrated plan to get sole custody of Caden. She had all the money she needed, her dad, very wealthy, and I was pretty much broke. And I had no contact with him for 40 days from mid-December until January. And so, yeah, I was crying out every day, every morning. I knew, there was no way I had a chance. And so as the process went on, God did a number of things. He provided me with an attorney who wouldn't play their game of running me out of money. And later, she told the psychologist that was evaluating both of us something that made no sense for her case. She basically affirmed me as a good dad when she had done all this, saying I was a danger and he was afraid of me, and that kind of wiped out her case. So he came through for sure.
That's cool. That's cool. Who else?
Oh, and he turns 21 tomorrow if anybody wants to reach out to him.
Cool. Who else? You said it was 2 more? Weston? Oh.
Yeah, no. First thing that comes to mind when you asked that was when Kat and I were having a hard time getting pregnant, and we took 2 years, and then we really started praying and asking the Lord, and then the church prayed with us alongside of us, and the next month we found out we were having Boone.
Yeah, do you remember when we prayed for you one time by ourselves? That I think it was me, I think it was Jared. Who else was there? Somebody, maybe Brian and Jared. And they were like, we're going to pray for you, but we're not going to lay hands.
Oh, that was like related.
Yeah, remember?
Yeah.
Remember one time? I always remember
I
that.
try to block that out.
I always remember that because they were like, we're not going to lay hands because we were talking about him having babies. And they're like, we'll just put our hands on your shoulder.
Actually, we were already pregnant at that point. We just hadn't told you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I always remember that day, though. Sorry, my bad. So that some of that kind of answers the second question, which was, does God have the power to deliver, restore, and provide for his people? We can tell by the stories that yes, he does. He has the power to break up a whole gang and to fight against lawyers, which is really hard. Now, so what happened to the Israelites when they rebelled against God, and what happens to us when we rebel against God? Yeah. 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 We remove ourselves from a blessing. That's good. Yeah. So we see that it leads to death. Sometimes not physical, but spiritual. I know that a lot of times when I get away from reading and I get away from listening to Him and praying and giving thanks, I start to feel dead, and that spiritual deadness that I have starts to carry into my physical body, and I start feeling funny, and it takes, like, sometimes it takes for me to feel real bad to remember, hey, I need to get back into praying and getting away from Him, because it's like, if the more I get away from Him, the worse I feel, and I think that being spiritually dead is worse than being physically dead, because you're walking around. It's like a zombie, It just makes me think of zombies. So why did God give His people His law? Like I said earlier, He gives them the law to teach them how to live and how He intended them to live. He gives us these rules so that we can live in a way that He wants us to live, because He knows what's best for us. When we get away from those rules, when we get away from these things, like I said, that bad things happen. And those rules are the 10 Commandments. I want to read through them real quick. You shall have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make any graven images. This is probably NKJV or King James, because it says thou, thou, thou. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. And thou shalt not covet. So when the 10 Commandments, I've talked about this before, are broken up into 2 tablets, right? It's not because He ran out of room to write. He could have wrote smaller font, but He wrote it in 2 tablets on purpose. The first 4 are the God rules, and the rest of them are the people rules. So He writes the God rules on 1, and He says, if you follow tablet 1, tablet 2 will be a lot easier. So if you have a good relationship with God, then how you treat others will just easily fall into that. The first 4 are, this is how, He says, you shall have no other gods. You shall love me with all your heart and all your mind. Jesus breaks that down too. He says there are 2. You can break it down into 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and all your soul. And the second is as good as this: love your brother as you would love yourself. So Jesus puts it in a nutshell. He puts the 2 tablets once again, but He turns it into like really short messages on both of them. But He does that so that we can have a good relationship with Him. Once again, what He wants is a relationship. And these rules help us to have a good relationship with Him. And like I said, not only with Him, but with others. Like I said earlier, if Maria and I have a good relationship, then the kids have a good relationship, and they have something to look up to, something to look forward to. Not that they can't make their own decisions, because we all have free will, and we can always get away from Dad. But that is what the rules are there for. They're not to keep us in control, which is what the world will tell you, but it's to stay in a healthy, good relationship. We try to stay in, like I said, it's not perfect, because Maria and I still have fights. We argue about silly things sometimes. And sometimes Camila has to come in and be the coach and just call us both out and be like, hey, you're wrong. She is not shy about we're wrong. And so we're like, yeah, you're right, we're wrong, and we move on. But those rules are there for us to not to hold and be perfect about, but we can try and be as close to it as we can. So one of the things that stood out to me is that God, when Moses goes to speak to God, the people are like, we want God to speak to us. Speak to us, God. And so He's like, okay, talk to them. And He's like, you will do this. And when they're like, okay, no, we don't want to talk to you. Moses, you can go talk to him. So he's telling them, and I heard this guy say, he says, the people, he said, the difference between the people and Moses is the people heard the message, but Moses understood the message. He had a heart for it, and he was willing to give his life for the rest of the people, and the people weren't like that. And that's where we see the difference, right? Another thing is that Moses said that later on, he would send somebody who would write the law in our hearts. And you see that with Jesus, because God, at that point, if he talks to them directly, you can see the reaction, right? They're like, oh, no, oh, they're afraid. Because even though Moses is talking to them, they can still see that storm and the thunder. And Moses is up there, he's like nothing. And he's just sitting there talking to them. And to the point where when he comes down, he's shining because he God's presence was on him and he had to cover himself. But so he was telling them, he's telling them what to do. But when Jesus happens, he comes down himself in a person and he shows him what needs to be done. And they weren't afraid. But they also rejected him because they were like, this is a regular dude. Aren't you Joseph and Mary's kid? But he comes down and shows us. And I'm not going to talk too much about that because that's what we're leading to and that's what we're getting to. But this is the story of Moses. This is what happened with Moses. And Moses is like an example of what Jesus would be. I was looking at the big picture, and it's like Jesus was known as a king, he was known as a prophet, and he was known as a priest. So basically, like, we're doing the priest thing right now, and this priest thing isn't working out because as we move into Samuel, one of the things that leads to Samuel is that the priest and his sons were very corrupt. The dad and the kids were corrupt. And so God speaks to them and he's like, I'm going to get somebody to completely take over because your inheritance won't be there anymore. And he brings up Samuel, which leads us to David next week. But so he's like, it's like he's trying the priest thing and that's not working. And then next, go ahead. Priest, then king. King and prophet were kind of the same because you got Samuel and king. Yeah. So then they're going to try the prophet king thing, and the king thing doesn't work out either. But in the big picture, this is the things. But once again, you see what Jesus comes to do because he says, you couldn't do it as a priest. I will be your priest. I will be your king, and I will be your prophet. All these things in one time. And it goes back to what God originally had. If you allow me to guide you, then everything will be good. But they went through this process of moving away from God. But that also, another thing is I was listening to Hebrews. Hebrews is very interesting. Hebrews is a very cool parallel that talks about a lot of the things that Moses talked about. And it brings parallels to like how this happened and how this happened. I was going to read some of the quote, but I was like, man, I could read the whole book of Hebrews. And it's really cool because he really relates it to the Moses story. And that leads to the last question, which is like, it makes me think like, where are we now? Where are we now in this cycle of, and it just makes me think of Thessalonians, where it says, in order for the day of the Lord to come, there must be a falling away first. And this is what we see constantly happening in these patterns. There's a falling away, and then God has to come in to restore. To recap, I asked Mo to play a video. It's from the Bible Project. It's kind of like the same story I told right now, but they tell it a lot better with pictures. And it's really cool. I really liked it because it recaps the story. And it says what we're teaching on next, which is basically what we're teaching on next, which Mo will do David next week. But he talks about that. It's a really cool recap. So, and once that's done, That's it. I'm done. Yeah. Is that it? That's not it. Yeah. Yeah, it made me think of, we've been doing children's church and Maria's really growing in that. And it just made me think like we tell the story, that we do some projects and some stuff, and then we play a video for them. So I was like, hey, I'm bringing that over here. Oh, okay. Cool. So we're in line. Yeah. So we can have a conversation. Hey, Aaron. Uh-oh. Yeah, that's it right there. Moshe, and how do you say Aaron in Hebrew? Aharon.
To take care of creation, and this place where heaven and earth are one is filled with God's blessing.
But Adam and Eve were led astray by a deceptive creature and exiled from God's presence. Their vocation as priests is lost. And with that, all humanity descends into violence. But God promises that a new royal priest will come to lead them back into the blessing of Eden by sacrificing himself.
So later on, we meet a new couple, Abraham and Sarah. God promises that through their family, the royal priest will come to restore the Eden blessing, not just for them, but for all the nations. And so it's this family that grows to become the Israelites. And they eventually journey to Egypt and then become enslaved under the violent rule of King Pharaoh.
So God appoints a man named Moses to represent him to Pharaoh and to mediate on Israel's behalf.
Moses confronts Pharaoh and then leads Israel out of slavery and into the wilderness, where they eventually come to Mount Sinai. And here, God appears to all the Israelites, inviting them to become a kingdom of priests.
So he's inviting everyone to be priests, like Adam and Eve were priests in Eden.
Right. But it turns out the people are afraid of God, and they don't want to come close to God's presence. And so Moses goes alone up to the top of the mountain.
And up there, Moses famously gets the 10 commandments. The first two being, worship Yahweh alone and don't make idol statues.
And Moses sees some really amazing things up there. First, he sees God's heavenly temple, and then also a blueprint of it called the pattern.
All right, the plans for the construction of the tabernacle.
Yeah, it's designed as a symbolic model of Eden, a place where heaven and earth are one. Then Moses sees something else, the pattern of a glorious human figure.
The high priest who will work in the tabernacle.
Right, and only this priest can go in and out of the sacred space on behalf of others. He's dressed in white, he wears a crown and is glowing with jewels. He's an image of the royal priest that we're waiting for.
And yet, the man who's called to be Israel's first high priest is the brother of Moses, a man named Aaron.
And while Moses is up seeing all of this, down at the foot of the mountain, Aaron is misleading the people by making an idol statue of God.
So the soon-to-be high priest is breaking the first of the 10 commandments.
Yes. And so God gets angry and he tells Moses that he's done with these people. He'll just start over with Moses. But Moses stands before God and he intercedes for the Israelites. He even offers his own life as a sacrifice for their sins.
And while God doesn't take Moses' life, he does forgive the people like Moses asked.
And so when Moses comes down from the mountain, he's shining, just like the high priest that he saw in his vision. It's like he's the real priest that his brother was supposed to be, but failed.
And from here, the tabernacle is built.
And then Aaron's family is installed to the priesthood.
But really, even after this bad start?
Yeah, and actually things get even worse. God gives Aaron and his sons really precise instructions on how to act as the priests. And then on their first day on the job, Aaron's two sons violate God's commands. And because they're in a place of great privilege and responsibility, God deals severely.
They die inside the tabernacle. Things are not looking good for the priesthood of Aaron.
Right. Both Aaron and his sons have failed in their priestly role. And this begins to make us think maybe God's people need a different kind of priesthood.
Maybe one that's more like Moses, who surrendered his very life over to God.
Yes. And while Moses is great, he also fails to be fully obedient to God. And so both he and Aaron die outside the land promised to Abraham.
So Moses was only an image of the kind of priest that God's people will need.
Right, we're still waiting for this ultimate royal priest who will intercede like Moses and offer his life for the failures of others.
The Israelites eventually make it into the promised land, and there they appoint a king and establish a kingdom. Perhaps now God's royal priest can arrive.
And this brings us to King David, and his story is what we're going to look at next.
Right. That is what we're looking at next.
I thought we'd have time. I literally didn't know Joe was going to literally just walk off. Do you make sure that it's off program? That because we had the video playing, that what's on the picture is me. Okay, cool. And slides. Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Week 4, right? That was week 4 of this story. And so we have next 2 weeks that I'll be sharing on David and then the prophets. It's going to be really fun. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, let's talk about some of what we got coming up. The first is the women's retreat. And so if you saw on the loop, you should have seen. So there is a link now for if you need a scholarship to the women's retreat. We encourage all the women here to go. You can go. Just put in Sandbox Church as the scholarship giver, and it will be no cost or whatever cost. If you say, maybe I want to pay half, or maybe I want to pay a quarter or 3/4, you can do anything from 0 to full, and we'll cover it because we want all of you to go. And so that's November 10th through coming up. September now, October, November. It's going to be here before you know it. He's going to have a baby, and it's going to be, and we'll have a new member of Sandbox. So, okay, next. Meaningful marriage. So, man, I wish Ashley was in here now. I thought that was her. So that's going to be this weekend, the 17th. I know that Ashley and Kat and the Nells have been working really hard to get some good content and make sure everything's set up. So we encourage everyone to be there. If you were married, it's going to be great. It's $30, which you guys all know. And it's 9 to 1. So we're going to start in the morning. We're going to eat. We're going to hang out. And then there's going to be several sessions, breakout sessions. And then we'll discuss in between the sessions. Emma just volunteered as a babysitter. And please get with Ashley or Kat, because they're organizing people to watch the children. You can't do 20 at once. Thank you so much. I think get with Ashley too if you want to volunteer in any way. She's I know, and thank you for everyone who's already said that they would. But it's going to be really great, and it really does feel timely. I think Joe, you were talking about it earlier. It's like, this is kind of perfect timing for a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So really happy and proud of Ashley and Kat to put that together for us. It's going to be really good. What else? I just saw the giving slide was next. Is that it? Already talked about giving. Am I missing anything? Oh, okay. We'll go back real quick. Ways to give, of course. You can put money in the box right here, fill out a thing. There's envelopes. You can go. This is how I do it. I go to sandboxchurch.com/give, and you can just go give directly from there. It's very easy. It's just saved on my phone. Or you could text Sandbox to 77977, and it will send you a link that you can give from there. So we encourage you all to give. What's up, Julia? Yeah. So you can do a recurring payment on the sandboxchurch.com/give, or if you text sandbox to 77977, it will send you the link, and you could choose the option to make it reoccurring. And so yeah, that's great. Julia said that works for her. If whatever works for you, I know that's great. Julia said that works for her. If whatever works for you, I know that sometimes I actually don't put it reoccurring because I need to. I need to see like physically do it, but that's whatever works for you. There's those options, and that's great. Thank you, Julia. And Neil said it earlier. You give of yourself, right? So that's what we want to encourage. It's not just finances when we talk about giving. And then last is Mom's Mornings. Every Thursday at 9:30. I think that there may be some changes to it soon, Kat. Because school. Right. Yeah. So Ashley's contact is there. You can also contact Kat. Because school started, obviously a lot of the little ones aren't in there, so their moms aren't there. So get them to make sure you're at the right place and the time and all that. But I think that's it. Is there anything else? No? All right. Well, hey, we'll see you guys next week. Life group will be as usual. If you are a person who works in the tech booth at all, this Wednesday here, we're going to go through training for the tech booth. If you're interested in saying, hey, I'd like to be someone who would work in the tech booth, or I'd like to learn that, be up here Wednesday. We're going through training. We have some new people who are helping us and consulting with us on getting some things straight back there, just so it's smoother out here and online. And we're all going to be here on Wednesday just to make sure we're all using the system the same and could be on the same page. So it's Wednesday at 6:30 up here. For people who work in the tech booth or would like to work in the tech booth, be here. Say again? Do you have life group on Wednesday? Yes. If you are not up here for the tech booth, you will go to your normally programmed life group. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we figured that not everyone has all the time in the world. So Wednesdays are already a night that are blocked off. So we could, if you're in the tech, you could be up here on Wednesday and you shouldn't have something else planned. So cool. All right. Love you guys. Go to lunch with someone, maybe. Andy's last thing. Andy's jiu-jitsu mega fight is next Sunday after church. So it starts at doors open at 2 or something. We're not sure exactly when Andy's going to fight, but doors open at 2. I know that people have already bought tables. You guys have, Johan, Laura have a table. Rachel has a table. So get with people if you want to go. You can maybe get a table so you can have your own space, or just buy a ticket. Andy has tickets. So go out and support that guy. He's a good guy. All right. Love you guys. Bye.